we care about other people, whether we know it or not, or we care to regulate our nervous systems, or what we could call co-regulate, when something is off because it doesn't feel good.
It becomes massively important for us to have techniques and exercises, self-awareness, breath, whatever it might be, that allow us to influence our horses in positive ways.
Welcome to Dear Horse World's new bonus series, Hacks for Horse People. I'm Noelle Floyd, and I'm so excited to introduce this fresh addition to the Dear Horse World lineup. This series is all about practical insights. Think of it as a toolbox filled with tips and tricks from some of the most knowledgeable and experienced people in the horse world. Each episode, you'll hear from two experts diving into their favorite hacks to make life with horses easier, more rewarding, and even a bit more inspiring. Hacks for Horse People won't follow a set schedule. Instead, it'll pop up throughout the season whenever we have incredible conversations to share. So keep an ear out for these episodes. They're sure to bring fresh ideas and thoughtful perspectives you can try out yourself. Today, we're thrilled to kick off the series with two incredible guests, Josh Nichol, an expert in natural horsemanship, and Julia McCabe, a breathwork and meditation specialist. Together, they'll explore how to create a deeper connection with your horse through techniques that blend mindfulness with horsemanship. Without further ado, here's Hacks for Horse People with Josh Nichol and Julia McCabe.
Should we take a breath together?
Yes, help me.
Let's do a big breath in. Take a second sip in, and then let out a big sigh. Do it again. Big breath in. Second sip in, and a sigh. Better?
It's great. Thank you. My name is Josh Nichol. Nice to meet you. In my work, I've developed something called relational horsemanship. And in the process of that, the goal has been to understand how interacting with horses can benefit relationship, performance, and general everyday interactions. I guess I've been doing that for about 25 years. And in the process, got to meet a lot of neat people. And that has brought me to meet Noelle. This has been built off that. So I'm very excited to meet you, Julia, and share a little bit about horses and breath work.
For those of you listening, my name is Julia McCabe, and I've been teaching yoga for a really long time. Before it was, mainstream, and it took me to Hong Kong, and I was teaching in Hong Kong for a bit, and have traveled all over the world and Southeast Asia, and have my own school of yoga. And so I was holding teacher trainings for about 10 years, where I was teaching people how to teach. And something that I noticed that was happening in my teacher trainings was people were showing up and arriving with way more than I just want to be a teacher. Big things like anxiety, depression. They were doing the training because they were going through divorce. They were, were suicidal. They were going through bipolar. There was all these different things that had to do with the nervous system that I felt I was in over my head and inadequate to know how to properly respond to. So one thing that I decided to do 4 years ago, because I felt as though it was irresponsible to continue doing these trainings without a really good groundwork for what was going on with people's mental health, I went back to school to do my master's in neuroscience. And so I'm a few courses away from completing that, in order to be more what I call neuro-informed or neuroscience-informed. So since COVID pretty much was, changed all of our lives, and during that time, my entire business went online to a platform that is all about wellness. Breathwork was a huge, massive hit, especially during COVID when people were freaking out. And since then, it's still the most watched, most popular part of my online studio, my wellness and yoga and breathwork studio. And it's all neuroscience informed. So I think why people are drawn to is that it's not just esoteric spiritual speak, but and although that's really beautiful, it gives people who might not otherwise be drawn to yoga and breathwork a different insight, or it hooks people in who would otherwise not try it because it's scientifically based. So that's what I've been up to much more intensely in the last 4 or 5 years. And yeah, it's been a really exciting journey so far.
Yeah, very cool. In my education, I spent 6 years in university, and I have a science degree with concentrations in biology, economics, and environmental studies.
Oh, cool.
And I find the value of that is that, yes, it starts to allow you to actually see what is, and it starts to slough away opinion, but it also gives a base and a grounding to inform ideas and concepts. For myself, this idea of relationship, and when people come to us, it can be a little bit messy. So having grounding in things like this are, very valuable. In horses, we see a lot of how people interact in their lives. I talk about the universal language, and it is about how people interact with everything because it's who you are. So universal principles bridge and cross boundaries. It doesn't matter because it's you. So whether that's you in relationship or you with a horse or you out in nature, your presentation is who you are. I'm curious to hear, you were sharing earlier how, people come to you and they desire yoga, but that seems to unlock a lot of other things in their lives, trauma and struggles. We see this with the horses a lot. How have you seen breathwork support people in their trauma?
Wow, that's a big question because I've seen it. I mean, I've seen it in different ways, mostly hearing feedback or getting testimonials or, at least once a week or once a month, twice a month, I'll receive an email from someone saying, hey, someone sent me your way to your studio, and I was going through a horrible time, and I was able to get through it. Simple. Like I was going through a divorce. I was going through a transition to, I had no idea that I was holding so much inside of me. And that's one of the big things that I hear often with breath work is with horses. And in all transparency, I know very little about horses. This isn't new. This is not my forte. It isn't my world. And I'm learning a lot that horses, because they are innately connected to nature, there is no facade. They're able to pick up on what that person is feeling very quickly, because there's no self-consciousness with horses. Horses do not care what you're wearing or what car you're driving, or they just see you and feel into you for who you are, is what I understand. Whereas humans, we're really good at disguising it. We're really good at disguising with, what someone might look totally serious or completely at calm or at peace, and meanwhile inside their whole world is chaos. So we're really good at holding and creating facades to hide what is going on inside of our emotional landscape. So the breathwork piece, where I see there's deep healing, is either people don't realize how much they have been holding in for a week, a month, a year, an entire lifetime, and it gets tugged to the surface because of the biology and the autonomic processes going on in the nervous system. And as a result, it could be everything from, as we know, it's like Carolyn Myss, who wrote this book, Miss Myss, I always mispronounce her name, wrote a book called The Anatomy of the Spirit. And she says that our biography is our biology, or our biology is our biography. So our story is in our body. And so some people don't realize how much of an impact their story has had on them. And then they do a breathwork session and they're crying and they have no idea why. So there's that emotional release that happens with a lot of people. But as a result, deep healing can occur, because it's like I was saying earlier yesterday, of like pulling weeds from a garden. And sometimes it feels gross, or when you go through any type of detox. So yeah, and then because of that, physical ailments, like there was one teenager who, she was born with chronic pulmonary type of disease that was affecting her ability to breathe. And her doctors kept saying, like, they were brutal. They'd say that, you're only going to live till you're 30, and this is a horrible disease, and just being really raw and real with her. And she had to constantly get checkups. And someone gifted her my studio, and without me knowing it, for 3 months, she was doing daily pranayama. And she went back to those same doctors, and they came out with x-rays of her lungs and said, what have you been doing?
Amazing.
And so that's like one example just to it's heavy duty stuff, like individuals going through suicidal ideation, and or and obviously it's not just me, it might be other therapies helping them, but and the biggest one is anxiety and depression, because it is a pandemic. Those are pandemics unto themselves, and hearing from people that they're able to be present to relationships, or that they feel alive again. Chronic pain is a big one. Hearing individuals be able to manage and bring their chronic pain from a 10 to a 0. So it's amazing. It's so powerful. And I'm just standing back watching it and thinking, okay, this is really, really cool. And I feel so grateful that I'm able to be of service to others and help others feel better about themselves and their lives.
Amazing. Brings up so many thoughts for me.
This is new to me. I'm green in the horse world. I would love to hear from you a story that was maybe a profound story where you saw someone, let's say, show up and they had anger issues with their horse, or they were going through something and they had no awareness that their energy was impacting their horse's energy. Or do you have a healing story of some sort, or some type of transformation?
Sure. I'll preface it with a few things, but absolutely. Sure. I have found that horses are sense-based creatures. They are feeling the space, and that has been evolved in horses over thousands of years of survival. They must be able to sense what's going on in another creature. So that moves them from feeling or just focusing on the outside, which is what humans have adapted to preserve ourselves. We hold things within, and then we exist on the outside of what is seen. What horses do is they react or respond to what's going on within you, which is what makes horses this healing power, because it draws you to start having to attend to what's going on within you. Energy and breath for me are the entrance points. They're entrance points to allowing a person to start sensing what's going on within them. As we define horsemanship, it allows that entrance to happen. So if people can see horses from a different perspective, one of the struggles that a lot of people have is that our interpretation is what causes the power of our energy to move emotions. So if I look at the horse and say the horse is misbehaving or is being bad or is being a jerk, that changes my energy. And breath is a huge tell in regards to that. So in a universal scope, when we find deeper truth, it will draw breath, because we get to a place of something that just makes sense deeply within our soul. So horses desire soul space. They desire soul depth.
That. It's beautiful.
When we don't exist in that, it causes the horse to tighten, and that interpretation or way will tighten the horse, which changes their breath, because now they've gone into a place of self-preservation. Well, humans are the same. Horses are amazing animals that somehow are in our souls. When people are drawn to horses, we're not drawn because we want to have another dysfunctional relationship or just because we want to run a ribbon. There's something about horses that pull us in. It's similar to dogs, but it's way different. There's something very majestic about the marriage of people and horses together over thousands of years of being together, how we've evolved together. And it also gives us the opportunity to evolve at a much higher level as well, because it richly can evolve our souls, our energy, our breath, our emotions, our minds. But it first comes with changing the tone of how we see it. And when we can start recognizing that horses are sense-based creatures, it opens up the door for us to become more mindful of our own senses. And energy and breath are two of those major pieces for me that allow you to just open. I work off of a principle when I'm working with people, and I call it the law of intensity. But if my energy is slightly more intense on a concept than yours, then you will naturally follow me. So if I walked into this conversation with you and I was very grumpy, and you were only a little bit happy, within a couple moments, you would get to a place where you would either have to become guarded and defend yourself, or you would actually become grumpy as well.
Totally.
But if you're way happier than me and I'm only a little bit grumpy, pretty soon you would just naturally cheer me up. So this law of
So how do you feel now, Josh?
Yeah, I feel great. Thank you. I feel really good.
I hope so.
So when people are with horses, the power of the horse's heart frequency is so much greater than ours. So this is why if you've had a bad day and you spend just a couple minutes with a horse, you will almost immediately change. Horses have power within their energy that's greater than ours. So they can have impact both positively and negatively. I remember a story to get to that question, a story where I had two ladies that came into a clinic, and one had a lot going on and had a very high frequency energy. So there was a lot happening for her, and she was riding an Arabian, and different horses come with different tendencies. Some horses they have more RPMs than others. And this little horse had a lot of RPMs, and this lady had a lot going on, and she just couldn't settle. Nothing could settle for her. And there was another lady who was very mellow and very chill, and she was riding a quarter horse, and this quarter horse was totally mellow too. And the lady actually couldn't get this horse to move. She was wanting help to get movement. And this other lady wanted me to help them slow down. So before I did anything, they were friends, and this worked out conveniently. I switched them.
Swaparooski.
Right. And I did nothing other than that. And I just said, I just want you guys to switch horses and just see what happens.
Oh my gosh.
And what ended up happening is all of a sudden the Arab starts to chill out, and this quarter horse starts to perk up. And pretty soon the lady that had a lot more energy was cruising around the arena with this quarter horse, and the Arab was starting to become calm. And it was just a quick lesson on the power of what's going on within us. And so our energy matters, and our energy can be moved by breath. Our energy can be moved by our trauma. It can also be moved by your level of personal growth. So the way you have learned to understand what's going on within you transforms what leaves you, and what leaves you is what the horse senses. So that's really where this whole idea of relational horsemanship really dives into us developing skills to get to a place where we are conscious of what we're doing. We're conscious of what's happening within us, because as sense-based creatures, the horse can tell when you're in a self-preserving state. And that's pretty cool. As what you're saying is that you're finding that breath can bring people to regulate their systems, which becomes very powerful. So I talk a lot about energy, because how your energy leaves you actually dictates if the horse can feel you. When we live in a self-preserving state, the horse can't feel you. So a lot of times what will end up happening is people will gain negative relationships with their horses because the horses are trying to feel you. So they'll bump you. They'll even almost bite you because they can't sense you. And they want to. They crave connection. And then if people interpret that as bad behavior, the horse is seeking conversation and relationship, and we're punishing them for it. So this creates disconnection. And so then when we can get to a place, and I will use breath in certain ways, and energy, but to move your energy, you have to move past certain trauma states, because when you're in a trauma state, it closes your energy. So the beauty of horses is that they will show you when you're living in that state, even if you're unconscious to it. So having certain techniques is massively empowering, because you start to see it, but first you have to see it different, and then you have to practice it. So I really believe that's where there's this beautiful marriage between breath work and just as a practice, because I like to stay in my lane. I'm not much for, I will spend 10 minutes with a person, and if I sit in a certain space and they feel heard and seen, there's a lot of tears, because it just opens up space and energy for people. But what I want to do is I want to live within a way, not necessarily do I jump in to try to fix the troubles, because that's not my space. So I love techniques or ideas that people can try and do that, like you're saying with your breath work, that actually unlock things. But you don't necessarily have to fix everything. You can learn new practices that actually seem to move things on their own. And I've found this with horses, is that people can just do a certain practice, and all of a sudden they're not hanging on to things the same, and that transforms them. I'd like to hear a little bit from you, but I also want to talk about what I look at as body mapping. You had mentioned that people will hold things in their body, and through breath work, you're letting them go. I have a whole thing I do with horses regarding this. But I'd love to hear from you around just maybe a couple techniques that people could maybe practice that just allow them to, you talked about regulation. What is a simple practice that people could maybe pick up on just from a breath work perspective that they might be able to use with their horses?
Well, first of all, I want to go back a bit because I feel like I'm going to be teaching within the masterclass. There's a lot of different breath techniques that people can go to for 100%, where it's going to be beginner, intermediate, advanced, and the how-tos. So that's going to be a part of the mini masterclass.
Okay, so we won't give it all to them.
But I don't want to give it all away. Yeah. And the first thing that comes to mind is just what you're speaking about is nervous systems meeting nervous systems. One of my favorite teachers, he speaks to like intimate partnerships and people in marriages and people trying to get through relational stuff, arguments, the dating world or whatever. And he speaks about nervous systems and how nervous systems, we are all just nervous systems meeting one another. So I loved how you gave the example of, if I arrived here this morning, I was in a horrible, grumpy mood. What my nervous system would do is try to either adapt to what it is that you're doing. And the reason being is that at the heart of it, we are all, even if we are a self-proclaimed introvert or, an independent, we care about other people, whether we know it or not, or we care to regulate our nervous systems, or what we could call co-regulate, when something is off because it doesn't feel good, right? At the end of the day, does it feel good or doesn't it feel good? Right. And our nervous systems are trying to find homeostasis. So let's say you showed up in that horrible mood, and then I would do things depending on my past and how I would respond to, as Gabor Mate says, little T traumas or big T traumas. And I'm arriving to you now, and I could do things like try to make you feel better, or if I was a people pleaser, or I'd kind of do song and dance to try to lift you up. And that's part of, and I do things with my physiology vis-a-vis my nervous system in order to basically try to bring us at the same level as much as possible. Or like you said, I could use the other route and be like, am I allowed to swear on this podcast? He's in a grumpy mood, then I'm going to be in a grumpier mood, right? So it'd be the part of my past, the part of my trauma that would try to one-up you, right? So what I'm intuiting is that horses are exactly the same. However, they have that lack of self-consciousness that we have. So I find that that's really interesting, that there's a no BS with horses, and they will show you as Noel told me earlier, they'll show you who you are moment to moment, which I think is beautiful. Maybe that's their gift to us. They are a gift to us humans. And, I think that part of the problem, from what I understand, not just in the horse world, but just in general, the natural world, is that humans, we believe ourselves to be the dominant species. So we've understood that our relationship with, especially with horses in the history of horsemanship in horse world, is that we are the dominant and they are the submissive, and that we are to train them and to do things to make them be ours. And we do this with everything in the natural world. And so I think that this is just new in this language. To hear you say the word energy and you're in the horse world is such a reflection of our time and how people are becoming more open to energy. When you say energetics, or the energy that you bring to your horse, it will mirror back and teach you a lesson about it, is really profound and interesting. And I'm sure that some people listening to this, there might be a segment of the population listening who have already changed the channel because it's too woo-woo for them, right? I just find it is really interesting to hear. I'm in this completely different arena of yoga and wellness, and hear that this language is infiltrating your world as well in such a profound way.
Have you ever felt stuck with your horse? Maybe they're spooking one minute and unresponsive the next. And instead of your training sessions bringing you closer, they're only adding to the frustration, and you both feel depleted or worn out. What if the issue isn't your horse or your technique? What if it's about a deeper need your horse has that's being overlooked? When I first got my mare Lady, she swung back and forth between complete distrust and disassociation of people to highly anxious and sometimes highly aggressive. From day one, Lady was very communicative, clearly wanting me to understand some things about her and her reality, but I didn't know how to interpret what she was trying to tell me until I met Josh Nichol. I had heard about his relational approach to horsemanship, so when I got a lucky last-minute spot in one of his clinics, I jumped at the opportunity. Within the first 10 minutes, on the first day of the clinic, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And I knew Josh's work was the missing piece I had felt in my own riding for so many years. In Josh Nichol's course, Understanding Your Horse's Needs on NF+, you'll discover 3 fundamental needs that each horse has: mind, space, and pressure. These aren't just labels. They represent the emotional core of your horse's behavior. If your horse feels disconnected, anxious, or even aggressive or unpredictable, it could be that a primary need isn't being met. In his masterclass, Josh teaches you how to recognize which primary need your horse is asking to be met moment to moment. Then, how to meet that need and build a deeper connection based on trust and understanding. I can speak from experience. When your horse feels seen and understood by you because you are addressing their core needs, they transform in front of your eyes. My mare Lady sure has. If you're ready to better understand your horse and get the answers you need, just like I did, and continue to do, head to noelfloydplus.com or download the Noel Floyd app on Apple TV, Roku, iOS, and Android, and start learning today.
I talk about something called the universal language, and I feel like that's this permeation of truth that actually draws all creatures into being their best selves. And what actually happens is when we are doing that, we actually emanate energy. And that's when we can truly feel each other. The challenge is it's actually a very vulnerable place for a lot of people. The more we do, the more we're called to be vulnerable, because then we're able to show up more in our authentic self. I like to think that every person is an antidote, and that's why we're all built so beautifully different. And when you fully show up and you're not hiding anything and you're not living inside of a trauma state, then the world can really feel you, and you can share your value with the world, and that's when your antidote is felt. Mm-hmm. The cool part about the horses is that that's the way they can really interact with us in a way where they feel safe. So the highest form of regulating a horse is actually by them never having to search for your energy. When they have to search for your energy, then they move into unknowns. And as soon as horses move into unknowns, there's no buffer in thought. So they have a response, they have a stimulus, and then they have a reaction and not a response. And that's what causes horse behavior problems, because the horses no longer can sense and be mentored by the energy within you. So anytime we're in a protected state, a trauma state, a struggle, whether that be a trigger or something we brought to the barn with us, it closes your energetic field. And I watched this. We had chatted earlier. You had mentioned, what's the first thing you do with people and horses? And the first thing I do is talk to them. Mm-hmm. And because what I want to do is I also want to set a tone of safety and energy so that people can feel like they can just be themselves. And then I want to see what they do with the horses. I want to see what the horse does with them, because the horse will give me a real quick read on how close their energetic body is. And that helps me understand them. So breath is very powerful because it's like a cheat code, because it seems to be able to get to the system without you having to always go and fix everything. Because but what I observed with breath, especially with horses, is you can see people start to breathe and you can watch their energetic body change, and then you watch their horse change. Horses, again, are one of the most beautiful feedback mechanisms, because they are interacting with you all the time and they care to, but they don't care to make you look good or bad. So with a free or a liberated perspective, you're getting this beautiful feedback. So I think that's one of the big reasons why breath work becomes super important for equestrians, because it's going to impact your energetic body and it's going to allow horses to feel you more. And if we can unlock the idea that horses engaging our space doesn't necessarily mean the horse is being bad, but it's that the horse can't feel you, that can be a wonderful trigger to just say, oh my goodness, I've lost connection with my own self, or with myself. So then as you start to breathe, you start to open your energy and expand again. So I actually came to breath by observing energy and seeing impact. And I don't exactly know where that began, but I recognized through process that breath has a massive impact on my energy, which then creates connection again. So I would love to know a little more around how breath actually impacts us within ourselves. Could you share a little bit about that?
You said that you didn't know where the breath came from, right? Where you began to figure out how to integrate breath work. And that's because it is innately a part of us as humans. Like right now, you just you just did a sigh, right?
Mhm.
Like, right? And we do
Yeah.
these things so for listeners who are like, well, I don't relate to this. I've never thought about breath work. Well, you probably do it all the time
Right.
in situations where you yawn, or you might yawn and like stretch your arms, or make interesting sounds, or yawning, or sometimes even nervous laughter, or we do things that we do in moments. Sighing and yawning are big ones that we do, that are ways of our nervous system resetting. And so that's the first thing, is that there's just basic things that happen in life where our breath is being altered in situations. Like right now, this is a little bit of a nerve-wracking situation, and as I'm speaking, I can tell that I'm not really in my breath, because my out breath is going with all of my words. And so I can feel in my body right now, there's a little bit of a sympathetic nervous system response, or the fight or flighty response. In my mind, am I going to do this right? Am I going to say the right thing? And what question did he just ask me? Which I've already kind of forgotten. But just the how am I going to, that this is the stuff of our nervous systems. We're constantly, like I said, trying to regulate our nervous systems in relationship with others. The relational piece of if your energy is close to you and you're kind of shut down, and it's about, if you, in essence, what I heard is like, if you open up, your horse will step toward you. Your horse will come closer to you. And this sounds so much like human relationships. If one person is shut down and another person is yearning for more love, or yearning to be more connected, it's a little bit of a dance of the nervous system. And so the worst thing that we can do in that scenario is try to cling or grasp or change or force a scenario. And really the work that we need to do is within and in ourselves. And so when we begin to, what we could say is regulate our own nervous system, there are different ways that you can regulate your nervous system, and breath work is one of the ways. And a little bit of, basic science is we have the, basic respiration is that I'm breathing in and out, and I have my lungs, and I have this exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. And so when people think of breathing, that's in the science of breathing, that might be where they go naturally toward lungs and actual breathing in, and breathing out. And that is breathing. And what is at nexus with the respiratory system is the nervous system. So this is where, as I was studying my neuroscience degree, it wasn't with the intention of, I'm going to go back to do my master's in neuroscience to bring together this relationship of breath and the nervous system. It was just to learn about the whole nervous system. And all of a sudden, the more that I learned, I thought, oh my God, these two are completely biologically speaking to one another all the time. I mean, the whole human body is always speaking to each other at all points in time. There's no separate unit, right? So, but in particular, so basic biology is that we have, if you feel into your own body and you tuck your fingertips into your upper ribs, in there is, right up in there underneath the sternum, is this muscle of respiration, which is the diaphragm. And the diaphragm is a really weird muscle. It kind of looks like the head of a jellyfish. And so if, listeners want to do this, or if you want to do this too, Josh, you can bring your hands to your outer ribs nice and high up. And then you take a breath in. And then you feel your ribs expand. And then you take a breath out. And you feel them deflate. And so in there is the attachments of the diaphragm, which when we inhale, the diaphragm contracts and flattens. And when we exhale, it relaxes and kind of moves up like the head of a jellyfish. And underneath that, so our nervous system is then our brain and our spinal cord, and then everything else is the peripheral nervous system. So the peripheral nervous system, if you can imagine like wires and cords coming out of your spine and down from the brain, they go all the way down, and we know that the the automatic or the autonomic part of the nervous system, the fight or flight energy that you feel before, at a horse show or what have you, and you feel nervous or any kind of nerve-wracking situation, you feel that fight or flighty energy, or the other, rest and digest, the parasympathetic response. It all lives, really, it begins in this central column from the brain to all the way down to the pelvic bowl. So if you think of a line where your spine is at, and so underneath the muscle of the diaphragm, all of those cords, they kind of like, if you can think of a bunch of spaghetti noodles or tubes of the nervous system, live in there below the diaphragm. So when we talk about diaphragmatically breathing, we're inhaling and exhaling and expanding not only our lungs, but we are stimulating those neural tubes, those cords of the nervous system that it's unbelievable when I show this in my anatomy classes and I show a picture of the autonomic nervous system and I highlight it in purple. It's like a highway of information is right below the diaphragm. Hence, when we say, diaphragmatic breathing, or sometimes when we do belly's breath or we do strange things on the masterclass together where I get you to snap your belly in, what we're doing is we're sending messages to that autonomic fight or flight or rest and digest system. And there's this magical cascade that happens as a result of this electrical chemical signals, telling the body that you're safe. Beautiful things like happen, the increase of serotonin, dopamine, serotonergic connections in the brain. And in our belly, we have 90% of serotonin is produced via the GI tract. So when people talk about having a nervous gut or have leaky gut issues, gut and brain is one and the same, gut-brain health. And I'm sure many listeners know about this. So, terms like listening to your gut instinct, or we talk about the spine. Oh, they're so spineless. To be in your spine is the beauty of energy anatomy. And when I teach from a yoga perspective, it's talking about the exact same thing. There's a mapping of the energy anatomy over top of this neuroscience anatomy, which is, I think it's so cool and so beautiful. And it's what I think really hooks people in because it's such juicy, relevant, obvious information. So for those individuals who would kind of were like, ugh, I'm not going to do yoga. Yeah. The teacher started to talk about her seventh chakra or whatever, right, and I'm piecing out. It's those people that I hook in because I start to say, well, look at your biology. There's a reason why I encourage you to do this if you are experiencing anxiety before a race or anxiety in your world and you get on your horse and all of a sudden your horse is acting anxious. And when I think about horses and something that I would do if I was really deep as a horse in the horse world would be to do what I do with humans, which is looking at basic parts of the biology, looking at your eyes right now. I can see your ears, your face, your mouth, your jaw, what's happening with it, tension in the body, tension in the shoulders. You can do the exact same thing when you begin to understand horse anatomy. A little bit of I went down a rabbit hole of horse anatomy and horse psychology, and ears forward for too long isn't necessarily a good thing. Ears pricked back for a long period of time and they just kind of stay there also isn't a good thing. But it's contextual, so it's noticing just like you would your partner or your best friend in an environment. Noticing your horse. Oh, what is he or she doing now? What is their tail doing? That can indicate stress or stressors. So it's that's something, or chin down and stress in the eyes. They're just like us. So I think, which is so beautiful. And when you use the word majestic, that's when it comes to mind. It's like, yes, horses are so gorgeous and majestic for even a non-horse person. Yeah. That's where I think, God, they're so beautiful. And it makes me so sad that there's that some horses may be being mistreated and people don't even know it, or that their horse is stressed out and they may not have the skills in them to pick up on, oh, my horse is stressed out, and
Yeah.
in understanding the relatability of
Correct.
the work that you're doing,
Yeah.
which is really beautiful to help people relate to their horses. And so, I mean, I know a little bit about, that's a little basic
Right.
101 of human nervous system-ish in relationship to breath. So I know that horses have similar biology, but from your perspective, actually, I would like to learn from you. What are some things that horses do with their breath? Give me, is there a language or terminology around, I know that they like, they do that, and I actually teach my students sometimes I'll say, be like a horse. But is there something that you've observed of when they do this, it indicates this?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. When I, just a little bit from my perspective in regards to breath, I talk a lot about short breath is to survive and long breath is to thrive. And then the impact that this has inside of our physical body. And the crazy part about it is that our bodies, by breath patterns and by breath training, you get to a place where you can actually start interacting with your actual self-preserving system, your parasympathetic and sympathetic systems. I think that's really the cool thing. What I'm excited for people to learn from you is the power of breath. It's not like you have to have a doctorate on any concept to just learn breath techniques that will actually totally impact you and change your scenario with your horses. From the horse perspective, I don't think people realize how impacted horses are by what state you're in, because they're sense-based creatures, and it is built into horses for thousands of years that when something comes up on the horizon, they have to start studying it. They have to feel it. They have to know it. They have to feel its energy. They have to sense if it drops into predatorial states or if it drops into, I'm just thirsty and I'm just looking for, I'm looking for food. That's not you, and horses have to pick these things up. So then what happens for humans is that when we drop into a self-preserving state, that releases energies, it releases chemicals, it changes our entire system. So now the horses are going to lose their sense of trust because they now don't know why. They can't predict why you're in fear, but they just know that you are. And the crazy part about humans is we can do that by thought alone. I can have a thought of worry and I can drop into a sympathetic state. And horses need triggers. Well, guess what? Often we're the trigger. We're the trigger for our horse.
Please.
Yes, the horse wasn't worried, but now we are, and that triggers them into a state of anxiety. So this is where I find a lot of, whether it be breath work or personal growth of self-awareness, comes so into play with good horsemanship, because you begin to know the power you have just in what you're doing. So I have this exercise, I call it the breath of 10, and it's like whatever you're feeling, to just stop and just take 10 deeper breaths. Try to just pass the survival threshold and just get gently into a thriving threshold, and do that 10 times so that you can get to a place where your horse has the opportunity to start matching you. And because of the law of intensity, if you can use that, your horse will start to settle. And I challenge people to that. I challenge you, whenever you're feeling worried, to do something that allows you to pass that state and just let the horse realize that maybe you were worried, but you're starting to move towards letting it go. And horse systems are very much like that. They have a trigger, they run away, and then they reset. Humans can carry stuff and carry stuff and carry stuff, and we can renew triggers by thought alone. So the more our horses can feel us resetting ourselves, we then become a positive influence on them regulating themselves. So it becomes massively important for us to have techniques and exercises, self-awareness, breath, whatever it might be, that allow us to influence our horses in positive ways. So I'm really excited to hear your Breathwork Master Course, because I think I'm going to gain a lot of value out of it as well. I'm looking forward to hearing that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to share it with people that I'd otherwise not have access to.
Right. Right. Yeah. In horsemanship, this is part of the problem, I think, is that we focus on getting horses to do things, or we want answers to the problem we have, which is, now my horse won't take their left lead. They reject the jump. They won't go through a creek. They're scared and spooky, and we want answers to secondary issues. When what I've found for myself personally is that when I've changed how I'm looking at things, I change what's going on within me, all of a sudden that transforms the problem. because a lot of times the problem was stemming because we were creating a bit of anxiety in our horses from all these other things that are going on inside of us. So then there's these overflowing negatives. If I have a certain belief around things and I'm interpreting that you're doing something for a certain reason and I get all guarded, that entirely changes the conversation because I've set a tone within me. So part of my work in what we call relational horsemanship is to first off have deeper relationships with ourselves and to know what I'm giving off and the impact that I'm having by what I'm giving off. So I thought it was pretty cool, as you were sharing in the beginning, that, you know, people are coming to work on yoga and maybe become instructors, but yet it turns into, as they become comfortable, and I feel this with horses, as people come in the presence of myself and their horse and they become comfortable. And then when they become comfortable, all of a sudden things start opening up. And I really do feel like we need more tools. People need more tools, because that's really where I feel like the world is going. We're starting to consider more about what is happening underneath my surface and not just how do I look. And I'm just so grateful for that, because that's what horses care about. And to build really good relationships with horses, we have to get to a place where we start considering what's happening underneath our own surfaces, because that's really what they're reading. There's something soulful about horses that they actually care about it too. I feel like there's a genuine depth within a horse that they desire for us to feel good about life. Maybe that's a little far-fetched for some people, because horses seem, you know, they're just trying to get by, but they desire deep relationships. They're herd animals. And I think all of us, we desire deep connections. Where I find people struggle with my style is that I ask people to be responsible for what's going on within them. And what's happening within you is impacting the world around you. So for some people, they don't want to hear that and would struggle with my work. But when you can get to a place where you can really start taking responsibility for what's happening in your own body, I watch almost every relationship we have start to shift.
It's so confronting because we compared horses to dogs. Dogs are different in that they're our gift, God's gift to humans to love us no matter what. That's their job. You're gone for 20 minutes, they'll come back, they'll lick and jump and bark, and they make you feel like the best thing on the planet. You feel so special with dogs. Horses don't do that. They're very much like an exact mirror of, okay, what's going on? And they will show you in that moment. And it's incredibly confronting. Like you said earlier, you know, you'll have a conversation and you'll talk to the person and you'll sometimes evoke tears.
And I've often thought that dogs allow you to see a part of your soul and not let you forget it, and to see how special and unique you are. And horses allow you to see your moment, whether you want to or not. And that feedback, both of those feedbacks are great, because if you only ever saw what your dog sees, you wouldn't necessarily see your moment, because you would always feel that deeper side of acceptance and love, which is beautiful. But what a horse does is a horse will help you understand how you present yourself to the world, which is such important information. You know, you need to be able to, the challenge in life is that when we see ourselves in other people, it's very hard to separate your trauma from mine. And now our conversation is a mix once we, you know, and this is obviously as in relationships where people get closer and, you know, in marriage and whatnot, it's very challenging to not focus on the other person's trauma and what it impacted to me. But the unlocking mechanism comes when I can become so responsible for myself. And that's honestly the most powerful, empowering change on this earth, is when we can become self-aware and self-responsible. And that doesn't mean allowing negative things to happen to us, but just becoming aware. And that's the power of horses, is that you will see a feedback. If you just took a moment and you took 10 deep breaths, you would see a change in your horse. If you were to work on something within yourself and you stop reacting so much and you stop getting in your head and thinking you need to be defensive, if you found a way to feel your own energy and your space, and you could do a meditation where you could become focused on your own body, it's going to change your horse. And I feel like that right there is probably one of the biggest assets to horsemanship, is that you get to understand you. But the key for it in horsemanship is we have to stop thinking that the horse is trying to be bad, trying to get away with things. We will often anthropomorphize and judge. And I think that happens in relationships. We think, I know why you're doing what you're doing. And that's my judgment of it, but I'm not then listening. And you had mentioned that earlier, and I feel like that's one of the most important details in the beginning, is to breathe and listen. because what that does is we're so used to not being heard. Most of the time in conversations, people are ready to speak rather than looking to listen. And when we listen, we can hear needs. And I feel like that's, as a teacher, that is a very important attribute, because we do have lots of information that we can give to people. But to listen,
They have to be ready to hear it.
well, right? And the opening them to hear it is how we present our energy. Do they feel comfortable? Do they feel safe? And then if I listen long enough, it will start to change the information I give, because I'm listening to recognize what's going on in this conversation rather than just regurgitating information because we say it all the time. So for me, that's breath work, is to get to that place. So man, this is amazing. It's been super fun to share and to learn from you. I'm very excited to hear your master course, and thank you for taking the time to do this.
It was nice to meet you too.